morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told how to voice radio. So today, we need to chat about the most surprising deck from day one of the Pokemon Trading Card Game World Championships. It went 6-0, and it's Beheeyem. Now, incidentally, the rule at Worlds day one is you either go 6-0 or 5-0-3, that is 5 wins, 3 draws, no losses. You make it into day two, any other result, and you don't. And there were very few players that made it through at 6 wins without taking a loss, and one of them was Beheeyem, a deck that confused a whole bunch of people watching. So let's have a gander, shall we? Now, Beheeyem is a very straightforward deck in that it has essentially one way to win. It is a combo deck that plays in essentially one way, and that's how it wins. Beheeyem has got an attack for 3 colorless energy that does 90 damage. You shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck, and then your opponent can't play item cards during their next turn. You then play triple acceleration energy to make sure that you can pay the energy cost from Beheeyem nice and easily. Sounds good. And then that's it. And you want to hit 90 damage every turn with Beheeyem, and your opponent can't play item cards, and there's little that they can do. This is not a stall deck. It wins by taking knockouts. Now, it takes knockouts far more slowly than your average deck, but it blocks items to enable it to play a slower game than your average deck. But of course, there is something that needs to go in the active. When Beheeyem goes back into your deck, you've got to put a Pokemon active, and if you just put another Beheeyem active, your opponent will KO it. You've only got 80 HP. They're going to be taking prizes. You've got to do something to slow them down, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is where a Lowland Ninetails comes in. We don't care about the attack, we don't care about the HP. There are 2 things that we care about for a Lowland Ninetails. Firstly, the ability, Luminous Barrier. Prevent all effects of attacks, including damage, done to this Pokemon by your opponent's GX or EX Pokemon. Although we've got Power Plant to turn off GX abilities at the moment, there's nothing that turns off this ability. And gusting effects are very bad. At the World Championships, the vast majority of people played Custom Catcher. Well, even if you play 4 Custom Catcher, and even if none of them are prized, that still only lets you gust twice in a game. Well, that's not going to get you that close to winning, ladies and gentlemen. You need to take 6 prizes. So against a GX-heavy deck, they are going to really struggle to take out a Lowland Ninetails, and they can Custom Catcher, but that's twice a game. And against a lot of decks, I mean, we saw this on stream against Gardevoir and Sylveon, and they just didn't have an answer. They did have a Xerneas GX that they used to spread a bit of damage to the bench, but it didn't really do very much in the long run. They played 4 Custom Catcher, but they didn't do very much in the long run. And you just completely lock your opponent out of the game. Sure, against really powerful non-GX decks, this is not great. But how many of them are around at the moment? The answer essentially is very, very few. The only really relevant one is Malamar, played with stuff like Giratina, which, to be fair, could give this deck a run for its money. But remember, if all goes well, you're item locking your opponent from your second turn of the game. If they go second, you have a turn, they have a turn. And then you can evolve into Beheeyem, attach a triple acceleration energy, and then your opponent has 1 turn of trainers for the entire game. Even if they've got answers to Beheeyem, if they can't play items, they might not be able to set up. Oh yeah, you know that Custom Catcher I mentioned earlier? Please do bear in mind that that can only be used if they're not item locked, which of course they will be for the majority of the game. Pre-rotation, your opponent could potentially draw into Guzma. It's not blocked by Beheeyem, drag someone off the... No, sorry ladies and gentlemen. You're basically hoping your opponent breaks the lock. You're hoping your opponent is unable to use Mysterious Noise 1 turn. And that's the second bit of the deck. The main bit of the deck here is using Beheeyem and a Lowland Ninetails. Oh, incidentally, I said there were 2 things we like about it. The other thing is we like that it's got a retreat cost of 1, so that we can use escape board to give it free retreat, or indeed U-turn board. I believe it was U-turn board played in the deck on stream. Hampus Eriksson, I believe, was the player who took it to a 6-0 finish. Yeah, that's pretty gosh darn impressive. So what do we do in terms of setting up? Remember, this is a non-GX deck. We don't have great Pokemon search like Nest Ball and Ultra Ball anymore. And it's not one of those decks that can take advantage of something like Cherish Ball or Electromagnetic Radar. What do we do? To be fair, you could play Mysterious Treasure, but it doesn't get you all your Pokemon here. We use Professor Round's Lecture. Professor Round's Lecture lets you search for free Pokemon with 60 HP or less and put them into your hand. Now that gets all of your basic Pokemon, and it also gets Pidgeotto. Pidgeotto is the other really important part of this puzzle, because it's only got 60 HP, which is low. Xerneas did take a couple out, but it means it can be searched with Professor Round's Lecture, and then you've got an ability. Once during your turn, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one in your hand and the other one on the bottom of your deck. And this gives you the consistency you need to get through the game, to get your Beheeyem, to get your triple acceleration energy, etc. And once you've got this set up, you want to run through your deck as fast as possible. We play Acrobike here to give a bit of extra speed, and one of the great things that Hampus did on stream, he'd play Acrobike and grab his basic Pokemon so that he could keep them in his hand, and if his opponent played something like a reset stamp to reset his hand, he'd be able to use Professor Round's Lecture to get free cards out of his deck to make it more likely he'd hit the Beheeyem and the triple acceleration energy with Pidgeotto. Because once you're up and rolling here, this deck basically plays itself. You need to have an Lowland Ninetails with an escape board or a U-turn board. Bearing in mind with Field Blower having rotated, there's almost no tool removal being played at the World Championships. And then you need to have a Beheeyem with a triple acceleration energy and at least an Elgium, the pre-evolution, on the bench. And then next turn, you retreat a Lowland Ninetails, evolve triple acceleration energy, get a basic down, repeat till fade. Just make sure you've got enough Pidgeotto and a thin enough deck that you draw into what you need every turn. And that is basically the deck. Against stuff like Gardevoir and Sylveon, especially the quad builds that we saw on day 1, this, when it sets up, can't lose. Against something like Pikachu and Zekrom, they've got Tapu Koko Prism Star. And they might have the odd Zapdos. Maybe some decks will have a copy of Hooper. Most decks don't have great options. And there was one card, now this didn't actually get played on stream, but if you were watching as closely as I was, you would have seen it in his hand multiple times. Blizzard Town. Blizzard Town is a phenomenal card in this deck. Blizzard Town reads, Pokemon with 40 HP or less remaining can't attack. Because if we look at Beheeyem, Beheeyem does 90 damage. So when you hit a Zapdos, they've got 20 HP remaining. They can't attack. When you hit a Giratina, they've got 40 HP remaining. They can't attack. Annoyingly, because of Psychic Resistance, Hooper will actually be able to. But the majority of good non-GXs have 130 HP or less, which means either you one-hit KO them, or you leave them with 40 or less HP remaining, and Blizzard Town stops them attacking. And this is your answer to non-GXs. When you look at this deck, you go, okay, fine, it's great against GXs. What does it do against non-GXs? You're not one-hit KOing, but you are making it extremely difficult for them to attack. Now, to be fair, they will be able to play their own stadium to get rid of Blizzard Town, but you're really hampering their setup and slowing them down. They're going to find it much more difficult to draw into their stadiums than you will. Bearing in mind, you're going to have multiple Pidgeotto. When you want it to be, Blizzard Town is going to be in play far more often than it's not going to be in play. The other really relevant card we saw was Copycat. I absolutely adore Copycat here. because your opponent is often going to have a really large hand of cards because they're unable to play all their item cards, and Copycat lets you shove your hand into your deck and draw a number of cards equal to your opponent's hand, bearing in mind, of course, that you're going to need to get this combo rolling every turn. All it takes is one turn where you don't attack with Beheeyem, and then all of a sudden your opponent's item cards are turned back on again, and it gets very, very awkward indeed. I should mention that Reset Stamp is also super annoying for this deck, because it gets rid of your hand, and if you haven't thinned your deck out enough, it could be awkward to find the other parts of the combo, but with Pidgeotto, you will oftentimes be alright. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, a deck that a lot of people did not see coming, a deck which we certainly didn't expect to go 6-0, and look, I'm one of the people that was talking about this deck and saying it's a good deck and saying it's one to watch out for. I didn't think it was going to go 6-0, and I don't think many people did. But I would very much like to know what you think about this deck and what you thought about it before Worlds. So go nuts in the comment section, but please do remember to be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, where we talk about any other games we like that don't have Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.